Hey, if you're tuning in with us, I have Raven on the line right now, and she's going to be joining us to wrap up our discussion from Sunday. So, the questions that we didn't get to is actually a two-part question I had on discussion question number 3. And if you weren't there in class, I played a video that you can actually find on Facebook. Just uploaded it a couple nights ago to our 20Plus page, and it's entitled I think it's Matt Chandler challenges singles, or Matt Chandler calls out singles. And if you haven't checked that out, take a look at it. There's some interesting stuff to take in and to have a perspective about as you consider what your life looks like being single, what God is calling you to and what God is calling you into, as He's given you this time to give fully to Him. So let's jump right in, Raven, and let me ask you to start off, what stuck out in the video from what you can recall from Sunday?
Yeah, I think that the thing that stuck out to me, what I can still remember even almost a week later, is Matt Chandler's call for women to, not just sit around and wait for a knight in shining armor, but to just busy ourselves with making disciples and kind of pouring into younger women. And, that was convicting and challenging and encouraging for me. Even though I'm currently with someone, I think that you don't have to be, whether you're single or you're dating, you can always do that. You can always pour yourself into other people. Especially when you're dating, it's important not to completely consume yourself with that other person, to always keep God first. But just thinking prior to, being engaged when I was single, that was something that I think helped me to not, do basically what he said, just to sit around and wait for a guy. Just being a part of, when I was in college, I was a part of InterVarsity, and, we were just really, just surrounded by a community who was just concerned about spreading the gospel and just helping other people, and that really is fulfilling. It's not just cliche or just something to say. Like, it really does fulfill you to know that you're doing something for God. And then just finding somebody who's also doing that as well is just kind of the added bonus to that community. So that's mainly what stood out to me.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this talk and you hear some background noise, I'm in our office building here at Sugar Creek, and they're doing construction up on the 2nd floor. So I do apologize. Hopefully it doesn't pick it up too much. But Raven, what you just said actually leads into the second question I have here, which is, have you felt like life doesn't truly begin, or that part of you is missing if you don't, or if you haven't found that special someone?
Yeah, I think that, I guess the clear answer is no. Obviously life begins when you're born.
Right. Okay. Now I'm talking like this sense, this feeling, not literal. Have you ever really struggled or wrestled with this idea that I can't really serve Christ fully until I'm married, or I can't pursue Him until I have that special someone, that my focus, or at least what's at the forefront of my mind, is finding somebody that completes me, like the movie that Matt Chandler referred to in his video?
That completes me. If I'm honest with myself, probably when I was younger, I may have had those feelings of, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be just feeling like, just as a woman, a part of, my purpose is to, rear a family, be a mother, be a wife, and that is something that you struggle with, especially if it's, is that a calling on my life? Or, at one point I was a part of a community where the focus was just on being single, and all the women were single, and it was almost to an extreme degree, where it was almost frowned upon for kind of wanting that desire, wanting to be with someone else. And everyone is complete in in the Lord, you know. But I think it's important not to go to either extreme. Not to feel like, okay, I'm not anybody until I have somebody. I think that that's one extreme that people go to. And then the other extreme is, I can do everything by myself. You know, I don't need anybody, you know, and because it's important that we're not in isolation. So I definitely think that there's a balance there.
That's good. That's good. I have a few things that I wrote down here that I want to share. I shared this in class a little bit, but for those that they might not listen to the other talk, I would what am I trying to say here? I would recommend highly that you go back and listen to the other talk if you weren't there. I did express this a little bit in class, but my real struggle from the age of 17 to 21 was that I was somehow incomplete without somebody by my side, and sadly I didn't see the reality of God who was with me, and sadly much of my time was wasted. And it's good to consider this. If the reason God has placed you here is to share Jesus and make disciples until you die, then why do we think we need someone with us to do that? Like, we have to wait till a certain time before we actually go out and do that. Otherwise, we're going to miss the boat. If we go on mission or God has called us to go elsewhere, why is there this fear that if I go out and do something that's radical, that it's going to hold us back from the life that we could really experience? In fact, Paul says that it's better that a man or woman is not married, just thinking about singleness and God's calling on your life for singleness. He says it's better that you're not married, because you're actually freed up and not torn between the two. And marriage is a good thing, but it's not the ultimate thing. The ultimate purpose for our life is to serve God and to pursue Him. And as we pursue Him, God will bring someone along our way, like I was talking about in class, that is pursuing Him just as hard as you are. And until that time, it's important for us not to get caught up or looking around or being anxious about who it might be. In fact, a lot of times we actually lower our standard because we start looking and searching and thinking that no one's out there, and we come to compromise with who we get into a relationship with. And we start to do that and convince ourselves that that person is mature enough for us. And I've played that game a million times. I twisted scripture even in the midst of that. And I knew God was telling me, no, she's not the one. And I had this example that came to mind as I was preparing for Sunday morning with that idea. And it's kind of like a boy who's seen something he wanted and it gets stuck in the gutter, and he neglects all along what God has placed right in front of him. And he's so fixated on trying to get what that item is that got stuck in the gutter that he's not realizing what's right in front of him, that he doesn't have to stick his hand into the gutter. And that little boy reaches into the gutter and ends up having to get a firefighter yank his arm out. And that hurts him in order to get him out of the mess that he got himself into. And I think it's similar to that same idea that we're almost like little children when we see something that we fixate our eyes on, and we go after it and we pursue it, and it ends up hurting us. And we neglect all along the life that God had right in front of us. And instead we fixate on something else and it distracts us. Raven, have you experienced that where you just got caught up with somebody or something else and it ended up really hurting you and really pushing you away from the life that God was kind of calling you towards?
Well, I don't have an example as far as a person,
yeah.
But I mean, it's really easy to, while in school, just to be distracted with a lot of stuff,
Right.
There are a lot of things that, there's a lot of events, a lot of stuff that I can do right now to kind of further myself in my career and do a lot of things and stuff. And sometimes when I fall into that, it takes me away from other things that I think are just more important. I mean, spiritually, like, spending time serving and spending more time in the Word and more time with, other people, of my, brothers and sisters in Christ. And I think that as far as that goes, that's kind of where I struggle with it. We're kind of being distracted with a lot of career, being overly focused on career stuff.
Yeah.
When I think that it's a really neat analogy. It's kind of like, I hope I don't mess this up, but they're like, spending time with God is kind of like sharpening your axe so that you can kind of cut down a tree a little bit faster, as opposed to somebody who just sit over there just kind of chopping it off more and more and more and using all of their strength to do that. I think that kind of spending more time with God is more like taking time just to sharpen it first, and then when you take that one swing, you can knock it all down at one time. So
that's good.
If there's anything that I get distracted with, it's probably that.
That's good. That's good. All right. Well, I got one more question, and it comes from the...
Am I allowed to ask you questions too?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I kind of want to go back like a little bit and just talking about, I think you said something about like pursuing God, serving God and pursuing Him, and then, God will bring someone along your way.
Yeah.
And so I guess the one example that I'm thinking about in the Bible is the story of Hosea, and how the Lord told him to take an adulterous wife, and for the purpose of kind of illustrating His love for us.
Right.
And so I wonder sometimes if it's necessarily mutually exclusive, like, can pursuing God mean loving someone who is difficult, or just loving someone who may not have ever had that type of love?
Always.
Like, does it have to be either or?
Yeah, always. I don't think God pairs anyone up with someone who is perfectly lovable. In fact, if that were the case, then we would never truly grow. We grow most in the most hurtful times, not to say that we are to hurt each other, but that because this world is full of sin, and sin is present in this world, and our natural proclivity is to go back to sin, along the way, there's going to be some bumps in the road. There's going to be some hard times, and there's going to be some struggles and misunderstandings, especially when you start talking about guys and girls and how they think and how they reason and how emotion gets involved. There's going to be some butting of heads. And that is always and every time to get us to not look at each other for our healing, but to look for God. I think He does that each and every and all the time for the purpose of getting us to focus on Him. Because when we kind of just look at each other and blame each other and say, you should do this and he should do that, and it's because you don't do this that this is like that, that we end up getting ourselves into a world of hurt and trouble, and relationships get broken, and the divorce rate goes up all the more. Yeah. And I mean that's a lot to take in, and that's down the road. For those who are single, I think we still experience that in our relationships with friends and coworkers and family. In fact, one of the reasons why there is so much brokenness in this world, not only because sin is present, but it's also because of broken relationships.
Definitely.
There's a broken relationship we have between God. There's a broken relationship we have with our family, with our friends. A lot of what we wrestle with is because it stems from broken relationships. And God is our Redeemer and our Restorer, and He wants us to always look at Him. And so with the story of Hosea, it's a perfect example of not only Israel and God's love for Israel, but also relationally, we're going to butt heads. And God is in the process of redeeming, renewing, and restoring us back to Him and showing us His love that He has. So, yeah.
Great answer.
Yeah. Did you have another question? It's like I could go for days.
I guess my next question is, because I'm just trying to understand because all this stuff sounds really good.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking like in a practical sense.
Yeah.
Because I've seen people who are women specifically. I mean, there's a lot of older women, a lot of single women in the church who desire marriage, who desire a husband.
Right.
And I just wonder sometimes if hearing the message, it's just trust God, just believe God, I wonder how difficult for them it may be. And if, in addition to telling, in addition to telling women to wait, like how do you tell? Another thing that stood out to me in the video of Matt Chandler is he was very assertive in challenging men, godly men, to pursue godly women.
Right.
So my question to you is, why don't we see more of that happening? Like, why aren't more godly men pursuing the godly women in the church?
That's a great question. I'll start with this, just off the top of my head, when you ask that question. Satan attacks men and makes them apathetic. Men will revert back to apathy very, very quickly and return to boyhood. And I notice this in my own relationship. When something is difficult, it's very easy to become the modern-day couch potato. In fact, when you look at sitcoms or when you watch cartoons that depict a family, how is the father in the family always painted? He's painted as a lazy, apathetic, humorous. He's a joke. And Satan will attack the man in the family because Satan knows the Bible. And Satan knows how God designed man. And Satan is jealous of man. Because God has made us in His image and called man to care for and watch over and gave responsibility to man to lead the family. He knows that if he goes right into the hearts of young men and distract them and make them apathetic towards pursuing women, then he disrupts and destroys families. And I'm not even talking about people that are married. I'm talking about people who could potentially be married or people who could potentially be making disciples. This goes into the realm of multiplying image bearers. In the very beginning, in Genesis 1, God says, "Let us make man in our image." And He made man in His image and His likeness. And then He said to be fruitful and to multiply image bearers. And that means two things. One, make disciples. And two, have kids and make disciples of them. And if God has called someone into singleness, He's called them to make more disciples. And if God has called someone into marriage, He's called them to make disciples out of His kids.
Right.
And so apathy is a huge, huge weapon that the enemy uses and that the flesh easily reverts to.
So how does one, as a man, like how do you hear the message of, okay, and I think we joked about it, like, you come to church, don't come to church and scope out all the girls and fight. You're supposed to come to church to, learn and to be there to grow and everything you're supposed to do to come to church.
Yeah.
So how do men perceive that message? To me, it would seem like, okay, if I do try to approach a woman, then it'll look like that's all that I'm here for.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand, I guess, the attack in terms of apathy, but how does one overcome that attack?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it goes back to what Matt said in the video. To pursue godly women first through friendship. And you observe, you talk to, you get to know, but you realize that you can't be as close to those women as you are to the other guys that you run around with. And there's a real emphasis, and I think there's a need to emphasize this. And this wasn't brought up, but I think this is some real good practical stuff for men to understand. I've had a couple guys come to me to talk about relationships, and there's this worry that if they ask this girl out, that they'll end up destroying a friendship, and that's a good thing. That is a wise thing to consider. Now, granted, you want to get to know that person beforehand, but knowing all along that you cannot and should not be as close to a girl as you are to another guy. Guys need to have really good, solid guy friends. Girls need to have really solid girls who are friends. Because if and when God brings you into a relationship with someone, eventually that friendship is going to have to be cut off at some point in time. Your future wife, potentially, your future husband, potentially, is not going to want to, nor should you have, a really, really close friend of the opposite sex. It'll mess up your marriage.
Right.
It's important to take that into account and consider that. Guys, pursue girls as friends. And if you notice that God is leading you somewhere else, hey man, you got to DTR that. Define the relationship. You got to have those conversations. And that's one of the best ways to save yourself and to save others from harm. Because if you go on dates with a whole bunch of folks, you're scoping it out and you're looking people up and you're just going here to there to there to there, you fill yourself with anxiety. You fill yourself with worry. You start thinking that 22, 24, 28, 30, 35 years old, that you're never going to get married. We're still really young. We are still so young. And God wants to do a work in us, and God wants us to use our time for Him. Again, we're going to get divided with our time. How much of it are we going to give fully devoted to God, and how will that work with them? And I'm not saying once you get married you can't serve God, but what I am saying is it's not going to be fully 100% all the way devoted to Him alone without your wife or your husband being thrown into that mix. So, with all that being said, pursue them as friends, get to know them as friends, knowing that it can't go super far as friends. But if God brings you closer, define that relationship, have that talk, then see where it goes. Go on a date. That's a good thing. Get to know each other in a one-on-one public place. That's awesome. So that's probably the best way to navigate it, knowing that's not a patented way. People have seen somebody from afar, fell in love at first sight. That's not normal. But hey, it happens. And they live happily ever after. Awesome. That's great. It's not the story for most people.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that, just the idea of dating is something that we'll further discuss,
Mm-hmm.
at our open forum.
Yeah.
The plug.
Yeah, there you go. The plug's right there.
Listening and are interested or have some questions of your own,
Mm-hmm.
feel free to come on out.
Yep.
And join the discussion with us.
Yeah, and that's going to be happening March 27th, and we're going to be meeting at the Life Center. I think we scheduled for 6:45. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, 6:30.
Yeah, 6:30. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to be discussing some of the questions that folks send in, and I'm actually going to go buy a box that people can put questions in today after we wrap this up. So that'll be there on Sunday for the next couple Sundays. And also, if you're getting our newsletter that Raven's sending out, you can answer those questions. Well, you can ask those questions there, and we will answer them come the 27th. So yeah. Before we wrap this up, I do want to ask you kind of the final thought. I want to give this to you, and I want everybody listening to consider this question as well. As we think about Enoch's life and how he walked in obedience to God, and he walked with God, how will we walk in obedience this week based on what we discussed? As far as Enoch's life is concerned, and just to bring us up to speed real quick before we close, Enoch walked with God for the last 300 years of his life. And that's a conversation to have on another day about, whoa, 300 years, that doesn't seem reasonable. We only live about 70 years. How is that possible? Just know that a majority of the end of his life, he walked with God, and God took Enoch up to be with him. He was faithful, and God was faithful to him. How can we practically walk in obedience to God? Raven, how would you answer that question?
I think just reading his word, is obviously very important to understand what he calls us to do. We're required to love God with all our heart, our minds, and our souls, and then we're called to love our neighbors as ourselves. And so I think that moment by moment, we ask God, what are ways in which I can meet the needs of those people surrounding me, whether it's at work or, in your family or even at church, it's a faith walk in the sense that you're trusting Him and you're putting your full confidence in Him. And I think that comes from just really staying in His words, that you can know that you're hearing His voice, and He'll never contradict Himself.
Yeah. So
I definitely think that that's a part of walking with God.
That's good. That's good. And I'll just leave us with this. Just taking all that in and wrestling with that, I think it's important to be an active participant in what God is calling us into. And one of those ways is by thinking, man, who's one person that God has placed in my life, just one person that God's placed in my life that needs to hear the gospel, that needs to hear my story? How would God have me to bring that conversation up? And what I found is really helpful is to be friendly to people. Honestly, try to serve others. Try to be nice to somebody that maybe you haven't been nice to, or just talk to somebody and hear their story. It'll make a world of difference getting to know someone and having someone to talk to about their life. Next thing you know, will be wide open. You can ask them how can you pray for them, who Jesus is, what He's done in your life, and how they can have a relationship with Jesus, and how they can join us in a community of people that love Jesus and want to pursue Him. So that's really something to consider and something for us to think about as we go, as we head into our weekend, and considering as we begin another week in the workplace, in our homes, with our family, and also with our friends. So, Raven, thank you for really just giving input and asking some great questions. And we will see. Do what?
That was fun.
Yeah. And there'll be more of this. And maybe this is actually a better way to do this, is actually have somebody on the line and just ask them and pull somebody from our group to say, hey, call us up. We want to ask some questions and see what your take is, because we don't always have the time to do that on a Sunday morning, right?
Right.
Yeah. So thanks for listening, and we will see you on Sunday morning. Malcolm will be talking through the life of Noah, so I hope to see you then.